Engineer and manufacturing specialist Nick Davenport just sold his business Nexus Foams to Skellerup and is now turning his attention to his other company, wool tech firm Lanaco. He joins me now. Let's start off with Nexus. Why was it time to sell?
It had become a 26-year overnight success, so I thought it was about time.
Did you go into that with an exit strategy? Because that's a long exit strategy, isn't it?
No, I went into it as an accidental entrepreneur, as one does. If you cast your mind back that amount of time, it was post share market crash and things weren't looking so flash in New Zealand back then. And I chose to start up a business, but never having done it before, I took a cautious approach.
So does that cautious approach, I guess you put that with 26 years and it does appear to be cautious, but I guess the accident only began at the beginning and it wasn't accidental from then on.
Correct. It was a lot of fun. And I guess because it was a lot of fun building a business and growing it and achieving success, after a certain point of inflection, there was only one way, and that was to try and build a business that had an outcome that could run without me. And I'd also had an idea on that journey about 6 or 7 years ago to create some IP. And Nexus was a business all about creating value for manufacturers, to make manufacturers in New Zealand internationally competitive. And by that I mean able to compete with imports, but also to compete as an exporter of manufactured goods. And I saw that as far as having that type of business, that's what it had to do. On that journey, I realised that I wasn't creating a lot of IP. And if I wanted a true business with some real growth opportunities, I had to develop something unique. And about that time ago, about 7 years ago, I discovered wool. And it was abundant in New Zealand, pretty much a waste product of sheep meat production, if I put it fairly bluntly. But it has amazing properties, functional properties. And my background as an engineer and a materials engineer, I was frankly embarrassed that I didn't know that, and that I didn't know that I could actually manufacture materials out of wool which act like the foam that I had in the foam business. And that was that point of change where I said, well, I've got to work towards an exit here and then start the next best thing.
Working towards an exit whilst at the same time dividing, if you like, the IP from, because was the IP in Nexus as such? Because you mentioned that you could use the wool sort of as the foam sort of substitute, if you like, as well. So how did you break those two off?
Oh, they're completely separate. I moved myself out of the office. I locked myself in a corner and researched for 2 years, basically, and started to build a dossier of information on what could be. I wrote down on one page a business plan of what it intended that the spin-off would look like. It's a very conscious effort, and what Nexus would look like afterwards as well. And
what's that sentence on that page? The most important sentence that you wrote on that one page?
I draw pictures.
What did you draw?
Basically, I drew the source of the opportunity, which was wool fibre, adding value to it in a range of different markets. And that's exactly what we've done.
It's interesting because value add is something that we recently talk about, and yet you've been thinking about it for a long time.
Yeah, I think probably back, if I cast my mind to back about that time, it was when Sir Paul Callaghan was alive and quite eloquent with the pen. And he wrote a number of things that's really caught my imagination. And having been a manufacturer in New Zealand, I sort of felt these pangs of responsibility to do something different and to really add some value. Nexus was about adding value to imported materials, which were not economical to manufacture locally because the country was so small. But that was really the turning point.
What made you eye up wool, if you like? Because I find it interesting that the wool industry's been in the doldrums, and really, I suppose the only thing it was used for was carpets, or we send some of it overseas for nice suits, and it certainly hasn't been, used, perhaps as you say, as much as it could have been. So, what was it about it where you suddenly looked at it and thought, you know what, that's the one?
I was in New England on a journey to look for a product for a Fisher & Paykel appliances material, which was a wool felt. And I met a chap over there who was an American and absolutely passionate about wool, and most of which he sourced in New Zealand. And his view was that it's a lost opportunity. It's terribly sad because he hadn't been involved selling the product globally for 20 years. And I guess it was just serendipity. I met him on a fishing trip, and we got to talking, and that's really seeded the idea. If he had this much passion about New Zealand wool and what it could do in my space, which was industrial markets, I just felt I had to stand up and do something about it.
So were filters obvious?
They were the first opportunity. It was saying, well, this is a product which is, the functions really do relate to how people live, and probably how they have done for centuries, keeping them warm and dry and cool and all that sort of stuff. But the brief bit of science that I'd found when I was in my little room locked up reading it was, this is an ideal product to improve people's health. And if you can have a functional material that can be put into products which improve people's health, you can create a margin and you can create value. Because one of the essential things for us on this journey was that it had to make farmers' incomes increase. Otherwise, they wouldn't be bothered making the raw material for us. So that was really the thing that stood out for us. And it linked into what I'd been doing at Nexus. It linked into saying how you can create value, get materials in large volume and sell them as very small pieces.
Is it, though, a slight problem that the more you use it, the more demand there is for the wool, and therefore the price goes up, which really means less profit for you?
It's a lot of small pieces.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we're trying to do, because if you say, well, look, I'm going to sell 10 million carpets, then New Zealand wouldn't have a problem. If I'm going to sell 10 million filters, then New Zealand doesn't have a problem in supplying that amount of fibre, but it does get the value.
Because I look at the list that there are: anti-pollution masks, appliances, healthcare, industrial ventilation. Were they on your first page?
Yep.
All of those?
All of those.
Then where did space come in? Was space there as well?
They found us. So
How?
I think we've been on telly or in the news or somewhere, and a technology scout in New York who NASA and Jacobs had commissioned was looking for a material that would act as a pre-filter that wouldn't melt or burn in that type of environment. And we said, yeah, of course we can do that. And that kicked in that project.
When you said, yes, of course we can do that, did you know you could, or did you just say yes because it's NASA and then figure out how to make it?
Good question, bit of both. Nexus existed because I always said, yes, of course we can do it. With Lanaco, I've got a greater degree of responsibility because there's people's health involved. And by that stage, when we said yes, we'd spent 4 or 5 years on scientific research. So, of course, we knew we could do it.
So I'm interested where that's at, because there was a lot of press last year with regard to NASA and the testing. So where is it is it the testing over? Where is it at?
No, it's ongoing. I mean, I think these programs, they probably wouldn't mind me saying so. They run at a glacial pace. They take a lot of care. You might have seen in the press recently. It might not even take off. One of the capsules failed in a pre-launch test. If that had people in it, it would have put the program back another 5 years for all participants in the program. So they take an exceptional amount of time and caution in it. I guess for us it's success already. And the reason why I say that is whether they choose to use it or not at the end of the day, it captured their imagination. It's being tested in their White Sands, New Mexico facility in real use conditions. We know how well it will perform because we've tested it ourselves. But their PR arm have picked it up, and the article is going to be coming out in the NASA spin-off journal, which is a global publication on technology transfer out of NASA. So it's hooked into that ecosystem. It's not going to make us any money at all in terms of making filters, but it's that real connection of life depending on something so simple, but so complex. It's kind of a really cute story.
In terms of competition, is there any, for example, Revolution Fibre's nanofibre?
Yes.
Is there a difference?
Oh, there's quite a lot of difference between a wool fibre and a nanofibre, and they both participate in some markets that are the same. We've worked with Revolution Fibres for a long time. We do testing for them. We've had our products worked up with their products. The big difference, I think, is functionality. A nanofibre is a very fine fibre which, if incorporated correctly, can make a filter, but it's very fragile. Therefore to make it usable or deployable by people, it has to have other things incorporated into it. A wool fibre is naturally very strong, but it also has this fire retardancy, it has this antibacterial capability, it has moisture management capability, all at the same time that it's filtering. And that's really the unique thing. So it's like this one fibre, amazing fibre fits all. And once you get the formulation right for making a filter, it's exceptionally efficient. And energy is, I guess, the next thing where it comes into play. So it's an incredibly low energy method of removing the type of particles that are harmful to people.
Is there another path it can go to? I mean, I mentioned 6, including space. So is there another area where you're heading?
There will be huge scope out of the program because this is why, I guess previously when I've been interviewed, I've claimed that I'm barking mad. And that's because we've invested all the way into the supply chain because, as I say, you have to return value to the farmer. But while we're doing that, we're working with the farmer because what we're doing is producing a wool fibre and breeding it to the functional objective that we're looking for in the market. And that's unique. That's never been done before in the world in this type of space. So that's and the data set that we're building is contributing to that. What it means is the performance of the product that we get continues year on year. It's totally scalable, but it also means we have this incredible supply chain of great integrity. We remove all the statistical noise of different breeds, different farms by using our own breeding program, and that's becomes then a flagship for the rest of the industry. And obviously, once we have built that core, that really different core of a sheep breed which drives performance to improve people's health, a lot of people will want that for different markets, and there are other markets that we are very, very interested in outside of filtration.
Like?
We can't say what those are at the moment, but they're very, very exciting. Yeah.
And when you talk about investing, and in order to invest, you need investors. You've got some pretty high-profile investors. How did you get them on board?
I think the story has a lot of appeal. I've done a bit of travel and a bit of talking like this to people to tell the story, and I think there's a real truth in the story. So once they hear the story and they realise the depth of what's being produced, Lanaco is not a short-term program. It's not a piece of software that may or may not exist in 5 years' time. This is a slow, massive, and increasingly exponential growth. And once we've built the supply chain and the technology comes into use in various markets, it's there to stay. So it's good.
Your mantra kind of is, as you mentioned, change things for the better. Was it always then whatever money comes along, it comes along? Was profit secondary to all of that?
Personally, yes. But obviously, if you're bringing investors on, it becomes the principal focus. Nobody will back us really out of altruism. It has to have a story which works. And I think one of the recent investors who's I'd probably call a genetics expert who's really got a track record of proving a global supply chain and IP out of genetics, is invested in us and is one of our science advisors. That really says we're on the right track for telling people that there is a really good investment story here. It's true, it's working, it's getting traction, and it's getting sales.
But I guess at the end of the day, if you've got some money and you want to do good, then if you can afford it, the profit isn't necessary. I mean, you've had a, $6.5 million payday, so you perhaps don't need to worry too much about it.
Well, 25 years is a long time to wait for a payday.
It is. It is. You're quite right, it is. So what are you going to do with the money then?
I'm currently going to reinvest some of that directly into Lanaco to support our next capital raise. So, and a significant sum. So, I think it's important. It's important to lead from the front. I obviously believe in the business. Other people believe in it, and if I can put some of that risk part of my portfolio into that, then I think that's the right thing to do. And
no more juggling two businesses at the same time?
I promise. I promise my wife.
I bet she'll keep you to it more than I will. Nick Davenport, thank you so much.
Thank you.